Bloodsingers, Book 1, narrated by New York Times bestseller Tamara Rose Blodgett.
Chapter 12. Joseph used his eyesight in the gloom as the tool it was. Piercing the darkness as a laser, he searched for their salvation. Lost over a year ago to a number of blunders, she would not be unrecovered again. 5. Were strong, they had the upper hand, as the vamps generally traveled by quad, and they were closing in fast. The girl was crashing through the brush. They but waited for her to stumble into the meadow where they stood. She would fall into their arms like a ripe plum. Joseph restrained a howl, turning his luminescent gaze to his first, Anthony, who nodded back, his muzzle lifting slightly, revealing teeth honed for killing. By tearing and biting. The other three were flanked them, partially obscured by trees. They blended so well that it would take one of the supernaturals to see them without night vision or some such. Joseph growled softly. The blood drinkers draw close as well. Tony snorted out his response. Let them come, his paws tightening into cruel fists, his talons still short, the battle's lust imminent. Joseph's primary enforcer was fearless and not nearly as controlled as himself. He'd need to dig deep within himself for control once he was faced with a rare one. They brought out the very basest primal urges within their kind. Tony had scoffed when told, but he had never been on the acquisition of a rare one, only blood singers. It was not the same. The comparison could be made that it was like an appetizer of Ritz crackers as opposed to caviar. Never the twain shall meet. They waited. As the breath stilled in their bodies, Julia burst out of the haven of the woods, the fingers of the branches reluctantly releasing her from their care. Her injuries assaulted the acute olfactory senses of the were, alerting and arousing them simultaneously. The were advanced toward her position. Julia rushed forward, her foot tangling on a root as she ran and she fell, her palms biting into the dirt. The needles and branches scraped her palms without mercy. She threw herself into running again, the fir boughs whipping her as she tore through, the smell of cedar filling her nose. Her lungs burning, Julia could see through the gaps in the trees. An open meadow was just ahead. She ran toward the clearing, feeling if she could just get out of these woods, she'd be free. She threw herself out of the tree line, her breathing ragged, her ankle a throbbing stump she dragged along. Julia was greeted by 5 werewolves. She knew exactly what they were. Now. Their eyes bored into hers, and she felt something integral shift inside her and open, a flicker of emotions assailing her. It took Julia but one confused moment before she understood that it was one of the soldiers within the tight group whose emotions were leaking on her like a wayward radio signal. She felt lust, power, and greed, not in that order. She turned to run back into the safety of the woods and was met by William and his team. Trapped. They walked out of the forest border using a smooth and unhurried gait. Julia felt her bowels hiccup, her palms instantly glazed with sweat, her throat threatening to close, a fear so profound she could not breathe. They did not look at her, rather, they looked beyond her. At the were, Julia began to shake. She had nowhere to go and could feel anger from the vamps and a primal surge of adrenaline from the were. The emotions collided with her in the middle, their emotional sandwich. Overwhelmed, she collapsed to her knees, a pain in her chest. She met William's eyes. They flicked to hers, then locked back on the were. She began to crawl away, tears dropping to the grass that was already drenched with dew. The wetness soaked her knees and the hem of the nightshirt she wore. Julia was suddenly struck that she was out in the middle of nowhere, in a strange place, with 9 creatures of legend, half naked. She flipped over and in one motion pulled the shirt over her knees to the tops of her feet. Her teeth did chatter then. Her ankle throbbed with the beat of her heart. Julia watched the obvious leader of the were step forward and William circle him. Their talons, almost identical, slid out from the tips of their fingers. In the moonlight, the vampires looked black, the werewolves a light sable. Save yourself, blood drinker. No one need know that you released the rare one this night, the were ground out, the timbre of his voice sounding full of gravel. William smiled. We would never let this one go. We but lost sight of her for one moment. He spread his hands, feigning reason, and continued, She is our salvation. Ours as well. We can breed her. What do you offer? The were asked as a statement, his teeth revealed in a snout that was almost human, until you saw the teeth like ivory razors held in an alligator's grasp, ready to close at the least provocation. It is an impasse, then? William asked, already crouching. The were backed away, swishing a tail as a command. With a gnashing of teeth, the were sprung on the vampire, and a war of fang and claw began. Julia watched in horror as the vampires began to fight for their lives, outnumbered 5-4. The prize they fought over lay to the west, an injured and sodden mess, huddled in a ball, with fear riding her like a shroud of mist as an uncertain dawn approached. William sprang, fangs unsheathed, launching himself at the leader of the weir, wrapping himself around the torso of the weir like a steel vise, his fangs sunk deep, the foul taste of its flesh like acid in his mouth. He hung on tenaciously. Even as Joseph sunk all 10 talons along his vulnerable flank, William worried the were's shoulder like a dog with a bone, grinding his teeth closer to the vulnerable bone that lay beneath. Joseph felt the horrible, burning bite of the blood drinker pierce his upper shoulder and stifled a howl of rage. Instead, he launched his claws into the vampire's side. Digging deep, like a handle, he lifted the drinker in the air, a piece of his shoulder coming with it, and flung him away, releasing and retracting his claws as he did. The vamp landed with a practiced roll, springing upright, blood trails leaking everywhere Joseph looked. All 10. Like many gazers, they flowed, the blood looking like black oil in the moonlight. Joseph howled in triumph. The drinker was wounded, quite badly, but he was distracted as one of his soldiers' heads flew by his peripheral vision like an errant bowling ball. His nostrils flared, and he was stung by the awful smell of a drinker quite close. He gave an instinctual, evasive lean as claws missed his exposed throat by millimeters. He reacted even as he leaned, bringing the claws of his right paw and swiping in an upward arc, releasing their full length as he did. The talons sprang from the stubs of his fingers and gutted the vamp as he leaped to finish the swipe that had not been true. Andrew's face had a surprised look as Joseph held him suspended mid-leap. He retracted his claws, and the vamp fell at his feet on the long grass of the meadow. With his left hand, he made the final cut to sever the head. That bastard drinker could have healed a disembowelment. He could heal nothing without a head, Joseph thought with brief satisfaction. The head rolled to join his fallen were, and Joseph turned in the melee, blood spray and gore littering the pathway as he began to move toward the girl. Belatedly, he realized that Tony already made his way to her, against express orders. Joseph was the only were allowed to touch the girl. Already Joseph could smell the unshakable lust of his first, riding an unstoppable urge. He would crush the girl if he reached her first. The sharp claws of Joseph's feet sprung from the pads of his feet, spearing the soft earth beneath him. He spun, using the finely honed balance they gave him. On the balls of his feet, he surged forward, each landing paw gripping and shoveling a spray of dirt behind him. Even with his incredible speed, he could see he would not reach the girl in time. For the first time as a soldier of the were, he experienced an emotion he had only heard about: fear. And underneath that, panic. Julia. And Julia thought she'd known fear, tasted it. She had not. Sheer terror took hold of her now, something even scarier than William approached. Not at a dead run, no. He advanced with purpose, a light in eyes that were reflected in the pale moonlight like a cat's, glowing. They were fixed on her with a look she couldn't recognize. Finally, as he was almost upon her, she thought she knew what it was, what he wanted. He looked like he wanted to consume her. Julia gave in to her intense fear, screaming so loudly her voice left her, and hoarse shouts were all she could give out. Her terror was not diminished from the lack of their volume. She scooted backward on her haunches with an energy Julia didn't realize she possessed. Her modesty forgotten, she scuttled like a spider backward, using just her hands and feet. Still he came. Chapter 13. William. William's sides burned as if on fire, the wounds inflicted by the wear deep, the poison released from his talons delivered and flowing through his system, weakening him. He needed blood, and his group was outnumbered. Andrew gone. He heard a hoarse voice, hysteria riding it like fine wine. Normally, a scream like the one he heard would incite a tornado of bloodlust. Not tonight. The source of the screaming was his to protect with his life, by any means necessary. William shifted into the form that would allow him to travel faster, his only gift. The singular thing that separated him identified him as having the blood of a singer running through his veins. His already injured body fought the change. William forced it upon himself, his body losing shape and molding into the raven. It was twice the size of the majestic bald eagle. The eyes remained a deep cranberry, a color not found in nature. His ebony wings unfolded to a span of nearly 10 feet. He rose, partially healing as he lifted from the ground, his clothes in a shredded pile at his feet. Lack of blood coupled with injury made William sway in the air. He sharpened when he was greeted with the image of Julia struggling in the brutal embrace of the wear, clearly in the grips of lust, breeding lust. William pointed his sharp beak at the pair, folding his huge wings against his body. He sailed down as an onyx torpedo. Julia. Julia sprung to her feet just as Tony grabbed at her. She used her elbow in an insightful move that surprised both of them. Using the hardest part of her body as a weapon, she threw it up into the half-human face that was so close to her. Tony helped her by leaning into her just as she jabbed it forward. Her elbow connected with his jaw and it stunned him for a moment. Julia spun and began to run. Her ankle screamed and she ignored it. Something grabbed her hair from behind and lifted her off the ground by it, her scalp shrieking and burning, torquing her neck, the wear-wrapped hands that could have crushed the windpipe they held around her neck, and drew her against his body, almost tenderly. His other hand tore the nightshirt she was wearing collar to him, using only the tip of one claw. It fell at their feet in a pile, and he moved his hold from her neck to wrap her up her arms. "I will breed you. Blood singer," it growled out between impossibly long teeth. Julia was fully panicked now. Looking down, she saw what made him male in full view and used her hand like a weapon, clawing at his face and kicking out. He shook her so hard her teeth rattled, and she saw stars, her head lolling about on the stem of her neck like a fragile flower. Out of her trembling side vision, Julia felt air rush past her, and another of his kind bore down on him, his hold releasing, the claws sliding away without purchase. She fell to the grass beneath, her knees folding under her like a chair put away. As she gazed up at the night sky, the sounds of flesh being torn and ripped, growling and yipping reverberating in her ears, a great black shape descended above her. Julia lay there, the wetness of the grass soaking through her panties and cami. She saw that it was a great bird, the eyes piercing her as it hovered above her in ebony glory, revealed only in outline by the full moon. She didn't even scream when the talons from its feet pierced her shoulders, lifting her body in the air. The pain was a numbing horror, but her mind protected her as unconsciousness washed over her body. The last thing Julia remembered was an unearthly howl of anguish reaching her ears. Then there was only blackness, the pain a spiral that trailed after her. Joseph. Joseph closed his muzzle with a snap, the howl echoing in the openness of the clearing. The small body of the rare one was clutched to the drinker like a dark token in the sky. One were and one vampire lay in bloody heaps, his first on the ground, heaving from exertion and in the throes of shaking off the breeding lust with effort. The fool. He watched as the remaining vampires bled back into the forest seamlessly, their bodies melding so closely with the shadows, their forms were indecipherable. Another failed mission. He looked at Tony with unveiled disgust. Maybe it would have gone similarly without this transgression, he did not know. What he did know is that the drinker had shifted. His intel had not divulged that skill amongst the runners. He must have Singer's blood running in his veins. The rat bastard. They needed that Singer badly before a fully blooded vampire could breed her, a thing the wearer had heard as rumored legend only. Joseph was beginning to wonder if there was some truth to it. He jerked his head at the three who lived, indicating their dead comrade. They hefted the body, the vampire's remains lifting in the light breeze as so much ash at the mercy of the wind. Joseph and the others turned to go, Tony bringing up the rear, his hand buried in the hair of the head of the fallen carrying it like a macabre purse. Tony's unfriendly eyes latched onto the back of his leader, malice taking shape like slow-moving poison, insidious and progressive. The kiss of Seattle. Burning, on fire. Julia was on fire. Her eyes popped open, and she wanted to scream. Instead, out of a mouth so parched her lips were cracked, she moaned. Her shoulders were one burning mass of flesh. She cracked open an eyelid and saw fuzzy shapes moving silently around the room. Above her was filtered ambient light. A presence came close to her, and she flinched. "Shh, you're safe," a female voice said. Right, Julia thought in exhaustion. She hadn't felt safe since the day Jason died. Another blurry person, a male, came to stand next to the female, who made Julia feel a sense of comfort. "We will have to put that shoulder back. Right it." Julia watched as they looked at one another, her vision doubling. She felt a gentle hand at her wrist and a bulging piece of cloth placed underneath her armpit, a fist wedged up underneath it, and as her arm was pulled, the fist punched upward, and she shrieked, the pain at once piercing and awful. Julia sunk back into unconsciousness on a hitching sob. William looked down at her, his hand sliding from its placement underneath her shoulder. The joint was back in its rightful place. That pinched look she had worn since her arrival was gone. He breathed out and looked at Claire. "She is so fragile," she said. As she looked at Julia, she took in the bizarre hair color, the paleness of her skin, a touch of blue to her nostrils and lips. She had lost much blood. She looked at William. "You will need to give her more blood," she said, her eyes searching his. "Every drop I give her binds us tighter." "Perhaps, but if you don't, she will heal humanly slow." In agony, she looked at him, knowing things that she should not, and he scowled. Claire knew what his life's goal had been, her eyes moving over, the telltale mark on the girl's forehead. What it had always been. It was in the Book of Blood, the vampire equivalent of the Bible. A rare one would save the race from the brink of extinction. A union between a vampire of Singer descent and a rare one brought the tenuous hope of offspring, one which William wanted quite badly. Children who were as strong as vampires, possessing all the abilities, but without the need to drink blood, living as the pharaoh in the cover of darkness. Yes, who would not wish for that? Long for it. Julia bore the mark. A half-moon-shaped scar, like a small kiss of flesh, hovered at her temple. It was the symbol of the rare one. It looked very much like the moon, pure white. William's hands balled into fists, guilt sweeping over him as he took in the gauze dressings, already discolored by Julia's blood. He had almost torn her shoulders off in flight. When she fainted, well, it had been a near thing, the dead weight hanging her like meat off a hook. He clenched his eyes, willing the image of her broken body away as he had brought it into the bowels of the underground, the forgotten city that lay beneath Seattle, the lair of his kiss. He looked above him, watching the feet of the passing pedestrians as they walked over glass that was a foot thick, scuffed and cloudy. It had a vague purple hue, garnered by a century of sunlight he would never behold. He sighed and looked at Claire, who had stubbornly folded her arms across her chest. The granddaughter of a rare one, she should be renamed Stubborn One. He came by his tenacious streak honestly. Claire was his cousin. His fangs elongated, he placed the twin points against his wrist. Sweeping sideways, he made a clean cut like a razor, thin line and blood weld, almost black. Squeezing his wrist to prompt the flow, he used his other hand to massage Julia's throat. As the drops fell, her full lips parted, and the first trembling drop held itself suspended for a moment like a glittering gem, then fell. As the blood found its way inside her mouth, she stirred, her throat convulsing and swallowing. Without waking, her hands moved to the offered forearm, small and pale against even his flesh, like carved ivory, her grip weak as a kitten's. William leaned closer, the pull of her mouth against his flesh, an erotic tether that bound him to her. She drank. William resisted his impulses. They were many. Thanks for listening to my soft spoken stories. See you next time.